I'm Kris Waldherr. I am the creator of the Goddess Tarot, and Susan Wands is a very, very dear friend of mine. And we both live in New York City, so I'm fortunate to know her in person as well as virtually, which is where we are through the ethers. And we're going to talk about the mystical influences of Tarot as well as Susan's new book, Magician and Fool. And we'll probably pull some cards, have some fun, go deep, go chill, all that good stuff. And you let me know, Susan, when you're ready.
Okay. Should
Well,
I have a deck? Like I have a deck that's not the Rider-Waite deck. Should I have a deck with me right now? Because I could run
we're
upstairs.
not doing a workshop. We're actually somebody says they're not getting sound. You can hear me okay? That's very strange. Hi, Kate. Thanks for letting us know. Let's see. Can everybody else hear okay?
Yeah.
Or
maybe
is it turned off, the audio on your end, Kate? Thank you for letting us know.
I just want to give a shout out to Barbara Gulan, who's here too.
Yeah. Hi, Barbara. Where are you coming in from?
I'm in upstate New York, and I love Susan. I've known her for a long time. I'm so happy to see this happening.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Are you ready to begin, Susan?
I sure am.
Great. So let's start. So as I began to say, I'm Kris Waldherr. I'm an author and illustrator. I'm also a tarotist. I created the Goddess Tarot as well as the Lover's Path Tarot. My most recent book is on natural creatures, which you'll see. I don't know if it'll come out of the ether or whatever, because I have this backdrop so that you don't see my messy studio. And it's a book about the Frankenstein women, and it's won some nice critical acclaim, which I'm very grateful for. But we're here really to talk about Susan. Susan Wands is a writer, tarot reader, and actor. For 30 years, she's works as an actress on Broadway and films, regional theater, and an off-Broadway troupe Rumble in the Red Room, where she performed her own material. Her adaptation of Pride and Prejudice was performed at the Cornish Institute in Seattle, Washington, and new works at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. A co-chair with the NYC chapter of the Historical Novel Society, she helps produce monthly online book launches and author panels. There's more. She's done a lot of things, very talented person. In London, she has lectured at Watkins Book, at Atlantis Bookshop and Watkins Books in London, and lectures at the Occulture Berlin Festival on Tarot. Her writings have appeared in Art and Fiction, Kindred Spirits magazine, and the Irving Society journal First Night. Some of her podcast interviews include A Morbid Anatomy, Biddy Tarot, Imaginary Words, Badass Bitches Tarot, and The Catching Up With on the Hermit's Cave YouTube channel. Susan's first book in her series by Pamela Coleman Smith, Magician and Fool, Book 1, Major Arcana Series, will be published by Sparks Press in 2023. And so let's begin. Before we go in, we're going to be talking a lot about Pamela Coleman Smith. And Susan is currently petitioning the English Heritage Organization to dedicate a blue plaque on Pamela's house in London, and looks forward to celebrating Pamela's natal home. So hooray, yes, thank you. So let's begin. I think we all have our stories about how we all became interested in tarot. Susan, what brought you to the tarot?
Well, I think it was pretty much, I was interested in it in high school, but I really didn't know who created the deck because her name wasn't on the Rider-Waite Tarot deck. And so after I moved to New York City, I had gone to a brunch at this fabulous place in the West Village called Nadine's. And there was a tarot reader there. I remember I was there with my mom and my brother. And the tarot reader read my cards and she went, "You're not supposed to be doing tarot readings. You're supposed to bring tarot into the world in a different light." And I just went, I have no idea what you are talking about. I just knew that I was obsessed with Pamela Coleman Smith. You know, when you bought the deck at that time, you had this little tiny paper brochure that came with it. And I used to carry it in my purse all the time because I just felt, why isn't her name known? And that sort of kicked off, oh gosh, that had to have been at least 20 years ago. That had to have kicked off my intense obsession to research Pamela Coleman Smith, find out her name, find out her artwork. Why wasn't her name on the cards? And then to finally live in the day in 2009, 100 years after the cards were issue to see that there was a deck called the Smith-Waite Tarot deck. I felt that part of Pamela's story came true, but I also wanted to write the series of books, having people experience what it was like for Pamela Coleman Smith to be a young woman born in 1878, to go to Jamaica, to go to the Pratt School of Art in Brooklyn, and then move back to London and create these tarot cards. So that's my arc about how I'm writing this series of books based on Pamela Coleman Smith and her tarot deck.
I have to agree with you about the whole thing with the Rider-Waite Smith. When they finally put her name on the deck for the centennial, it felt like at last. And I just thought, like, why did it take them so long? Because it's her images that we remember, and it's influenced so many decks for so many years. So what sort of readings do you do? Let's go more to because even though you said they were like, you're not supposed to be involved with tarot this way, but that way, you still do read the tarot. And I know you've read from me and given me some very powerful readings. What sort of readings do you do? What's your focus? I think we all have as readings our particular thing that we feel comfortable doing. Like, I'm very comfortable reading for artists, and especially about the creative process. What about you?
Well, for a while when I worked for Shite Day Advertising, I was sort of hired as their in-house event tarot reader. And so when I would read for big events where it was noisy and there was drinking and, all sorts of hoo-ha going on, I found that a very hard way to read tarot cards. So I learned that is not the way I want to do it. My go-to spread, of course, for me is the Celtic Cross. Much more so, I get much more out of that than a 3-chord spread. And then, of course, with you, I think we actually have done this, is the pyramid spread that Mary Greer talked about on her website, that you just use the majors. I love that spread, but you have to really take a lot of time to use all the 22 cards in the major to do it. But I try not to get too obsessed with getting upset about. I get a couple cards all the time. It's sort of like a nagging, godmother going, you're not still being authentic or true to this. So I have to be careful how often I do the cards for myself.
Right.
I don't do cards for money so much for people, but I do them for friends, especially for friends who are going through crisis or transition. Then I feel like it's a very happy obligation. I'm very happy to meet. But for my own practice, yeah, Celtic Cross every time.
I get drawn to the Celtic Cross too, and it's interesting because it's one that I think for beginners it's not very accessible, and I actually teach it in an amended way where you only use 7 cards, because I do teach tarot to creatives. But I know what you mean about you have certain cards that keep showing up. And I think that brings us to another question we're going to talk about. What cards do you consistently get or annoyed by? Like, I call those are called stalker cards when they keep showing up.
Yeah.
And there was somebody I was reading for who had a real estate situation. I know that we kept getting the devil, and it was about the person she was buying the apartment from, who, as it turned out, had certain health conditions and mental health issues that made it really impossible for my friend to purchase this apartment. And this went on for over a year. We watched the devil move into all the different places of the Celtic Cross, like from the near past to the near future to crowning her. And then finally, once she gave up on buying this apartment and bought another better apartment, it disappeared, never came back.
Isn't that something? It really,
yeah,
it's such a good way to call it a stalker card, because at the time you just keep going, it's a vague annoyance, and then you don't really pick up what on earth you possibly saying. For years, I got the Hangman when I was trying to publish Magician in Full the first time, because I worked with an English publisher. All he did was list it on his website. The book wasn't really quite ready or quite set. And I just kept swatting away the message that the Hangman was saying, not yet, you're still settling. And once I found the 1700 edit and copyright, then I stopped getting that darn card.
That's what happens. And which cards annoy you?
Queen of Wands.
The Queen of Wands, really?
Only
I'm surprised.
because
I love the Queen of Wands.
She shows up when I'm not paying attention to my intuition.
Oh, she's kind of like,
Yes.
So funny.
The little black cat at her feet, the whole idea that you're supposed to be large and in charge. And I sabotage myself by not paying attention to what my intuition says. I mean, I used to love to get it because it had my last name on it,
Of course.
Yeah. And then after a while, you just feel like it's some eternal member of your family coming in going, you're not paying attention.
I know, I know, I know. I understand that. The card, this is going to surprise you that I get annoyed by, and I get quite a bit. You'll never guess it.
Which one?
Temperance.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting. Do you think it's about
Yeah,
being
it's a card that I
unbalanced?
really have a hard time wrapping my mind around. It's just there's certain cards, and I've said this to my students, that you'll find some cards you just don't connect with as much, but it's interesting to go deeper. And I think for me, it's about there's a certain remove in temperance that I find uncomfortable.
And just like the star, she's got 1 foot in the water and 1 foot on
But
the ground.
it's very much like the star, exactly like the star. And it's interesting because she comes right before the devil, which is about imbalance. But of course, we all hate the tower and all of that.
Power, death, devil, and those three.
Well, but yeah, it's funny because I teach about, like, there are these 3 cards that you get that people are just really uncomfortable with, and those are them. But I actually have grown to love the 10 of Swords, even though I know that Pamela's imagery is very intense. But I always feel like, okay, whatever's worse is behind me, and now we're going to move on and start the new cycle. We've learned what we can.
Yes, and same with 3 of Swords, right through the heart.
Very much so.
Like
and that's also a lot of the 3 of Swords is about oversensitivity, I think. But yes, definitely.
Yeah.
So what other cards well, I know you said the Queen of Wands, which cracks me up because you are the Queen of Wands. What other ones?
Well, the ones that I have a big, resonance with is the Lover's card, of course. It took me a long time in my life to find my right partner, and now that I found him, it's just a wonderful reminder that eventually life works out. But there are times when you're getting the cards in the beginning, how it meant one thing for the longest time, a very fraught situation, and then to have it turn into a reminder that you can reinvent yourself at any time. And what is a definition but experience? And as you have more experience in your lifetime, what was a card that was not a pleasant experience can somehow, through your life path, become something else. So that's been an interesting experience too, to see how that can change as a living
I think
organism.
that's a very wise way to talk about it, to think about it. It also reminds us how far we've come. It's like an affirmation.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why I think studying these cards, it's like a little art gallery of your subconscious. They're rotating.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah. That's so true. So what is mystical to you about the tarot?
I'm so glad we're talking about this.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're here. Mystical influences of tarot. Let's dive in. Yeah.
I think people are drawn to the tarot because sometimes there's a certain sensation we get when a card is drawn where we have this frisson of energy, like either it's unpleasant, like what we were talking about, or recognition, or just we don't know what the heck, why are we having this reaction to something? And I think Sasha Graham is the one who always says this, that there's 3 people in a reading. There's you, the reader, and then the card's energy itself. And to me, the mystical part is the energy of the cards itself. And so, for me, sometimes when I draw a card, I always say, I didn't do the reading, the card did the reading. And that absolves me of any energy. As long as I get in touch with the querent who's asking, I just hand the energy over to the cards and say, reveal yourself or connect, whatever's possible. But that's where the mystical aspect for me in tarot happens, is that someone can come to you with a very specific question they want to address. And the cards will take a total left turn and say, no, we're going to be talking about this because this is actually more important. It's not necessarily fortune telling, but the energies can tell something heavy is coming down the line. And I can't tell you the number of times in a reading there has been a warning or an image or a situation that presents itself that I have no idea what it's talking about. But years later or time later, it has come as a harbinger that has stuck with people to pay attention.
I definitely, I really agree with you. I know that I've had experiences with that where the cards have a wisdom onto themselves and you have to respect that and go with it. It's not like you can control them, and that's part of what makes it mystical, is that you're entering into a relationship with them where you're working together. And I know that when I'm really in the deep of it, a lot of times I don't even remember what I've said. You've seen me read. It's like I'm channeling.
You're channeling, absolutely.
Yeah,
That's a
and
good
the cards
thing.
facilitate that.
And I think that's what a mystic is getting a mystical experience, is getting an essence that is totally exotic and unfamiliar to you. And yet in some way it's a frequency of the divine. So I think that's what's wonderful, why people still so associate tarot with sort of ooey ooh stuff, because we are having to go to a place that we're not usually comfortable with, having to identify a frequency that is speaking to us if we're open to it.
I think that's very, very well put. It does feel like that. And I think that's also part of what frightens people about the tarot, because it's going to tell you the truth. You just have to be open to it.
Yes. And always try to start my readings by saying, I am not a fortune teller. I'm not telling you the fortune. We're taking a snapshot of the present. And the present encompasses this energy. So I mean, I think Jung saw it that way too. I mean, that's why he picked this particular tarot deck as something that was great for introspection, because it taps into your major insights about how you identify with what these images are. So
I think that's very true. I do something similar. I always say, this is a reflection of the moment. If you don't like it, find a way to change it, because you always have free will. It's just showing you what may happen if you continue with the path, especially with the Celtic cross, where you go into the foundation, what's crowning you, what's past, and so on and so forth. It's just, this is how things stand here, but you can change it. And then you go into, okay, how can we change it? What cards can we pull? How can we empower you using the tarot?
And which is why it's so great for a writer's process too. You know,
it really is.
Because you can get stuck or have no vision about where you need to go. And then just doing your own personal ask for guidance. You know, sometimes the image of where you need to direct your objective is revealed.
So let's get back to Pamela Coleman Smith. Do you think Pamela, the protagonist of your book, experiences a mystical sense about her tarot cards? I mean, do you think she had any idea how important and long-lasting her art would be on the best-selling tarot deck of all time?
I don't think she knew that it would sell 100 million copies in 20 countries. But I do think that working with the Golden Dawn, she may have had access to some, rituals. I always see her signature as a sigil, where she was claiming the energy going forward. Since her name wasn't on the deck, nobody knew that she really did it. But the fact that she did these 3 interlocking letters of PCS, I see that as a magical spell of sorts. And that's why I'm always so chuffed in seeing her artwork that she also created, that her signature, even if we can't find her name, she left this portal that claimed it. And the fact that there's also a full stop next to her 3 letters, the period. And that was used almost as a copyright in the day, saying, I own this is mine, this stops here, this encompasses this piece of artwork. So I often think that Pamela actually didn't do tarot cards for herself. I have the feeling that once she drew them, she didn't really use them as a means of meditation, but she used them as her children. So I personally don't get the sense that she was sitting there doing tarot spreads to get direction for her artwork. What about you? What do you think?
Oh, I do not know nearly as much about Pamela Coleman Smith as you do. So I really can't say, but I think that she would be astonished to realize the influence she had. My sense of Pamela is that she was somebody who was intensely creative and in search of experience. And so once she finished one thing, she was on to the next.
Absolutely.
Always evolving, always growing.
And no attachment to where it landed, really. I mean,
which is a wonderful thing. I mean, think about, we were about all the different places she lived. Like, for example, she lived in Jamaica from the time she was 10 until the time she was 15. And there is a very particular world of the paranormal that comes from Jamaica. How do you think that influenced Pamela? I know that she did some Anansi stories that she illustrated, but she didn't write them. Is that correct?
That's right. She memorized them from her caretaker, Miss Jones, who was in charge of her, supposedly, who also chaperoned her in New York City when she was here going to Pratt. So she memorized these magical stories of Anne Nancy, the magical spider who took on death and took on all these creatures. So she knew of the Obe magic in Jamaica. And I can't vouch for how much Miss Smith knew, but in terms of knowing the culture of Jamaica at that time, it was very much a privileged telling that Miss Jones would tell her these stories of that community. So, and the fact that Pamela was the first person in the United States to have this book of Anne Nancy folk tales written in the Jamaican patois, she's the first incidence citing in the US Copyright Office of Jamaican patois being in print. So when she would come back and recite them as a performance piece, not only would she entertain people, but the fact that R.H. Russell published these books in 1899 really set the magic of the Anne Nancy stories in the Victorian world. So I'm sure she was familiar with doopies and with curses and spells. It's all there in her Anne Nancy stories. So I think she understood the idea that that was a very strong magical universe.
So having the strong connection with Pamela Coleman Smith, how has it influenced your life going on? I mean, I know that you're writing about it and you've learned about her as an artist and as a performer. Do you feel a connection with her?
I feel there's no excuse for not being fearless. After seeing what she did, there is no excuse. There's no excuse not to design wallpaper and make a poster and teach somebody how to print and go get arrested for women's votes. I mean, I just see the risks she took in her lifetime was so little payback. She didn't do it. I mean, she died broken, penniless in an unmarked grave. And yet her artwork is in 8 international museums from England to the United States. So her generous ideas of just get the artwork out there, you know, just keep writing, just keep reinventing, just move on, and don't be so precious about whether you're successful at this or whether it lands. The whole idea is to get in touch with your creative self and to be authentic and to be worthy of it. I mean, I love her article that she wrote when she was coming back to Pratt. She wrote an article called "Should the Art Student Think?" You know, and you think the natural answer would be yes. But
she was also somebody who used synesthesia and other things to almost channel her artwork. And this was before the surrealists were using those sort of tools regularly. So she was really ahead of her time.
And, you know, was this second sight, the synesthesia, was it a blessing or a curse? I mean, I think if she was alive today, would they give her Ritalin? Because, you know, she's seeing things and tasting colors and seeing visions of paintings come about. I'm so grateful in some ways that her gift was left alone and that she was allowed to express herself as a natural artist. Now, did she have support as she went along because she was odd and not typical? No, she did not. But she was absolutely authentic and true to herself.
I think that's a great lesson about being authentic and true to yourself and just living a creative life, which is what she did in spades.
Yes.
Even if maybe you're not sure how it's going to end up or whether it's going to work out. You've been to Berlin twice to lecture on tarot for the Occulture Conference. Do you teach Pamela's deck there, or is there something else going on? Because it seems like you're really devoted to bringing her wisdom and her creativity to a wider audience.
Well, the thing that I like to do for the Occulture conferences in Berlin is to showcase a variety of decks to show how Pamela is sort of the mother of the modern deck and how all these other derivatives have come from it. So when I lecture there, I either talk about the color frequency that's in Pamela's many editions of her decks, as opposed to other decks, or show modern decks cross-culturally, how they have also evolved from Pamela. So I'll talk about the Apocalypse deck and the Haitian Voodoo deck and Tiana Miller's deck, root work. So I like to do a big cross section when I lecture about tarot and not focus strictly on Pamela's work, because I like to show how her work is in context to the tarot deck world. That's what I get the most excited about. And to bring the idea of other decks, especially decks created by women, to a more international platform is very exciting. I've actually showcased your deck.
I know, I remember you asked me. Yeah, no,
it's
just, I mean, I was very, very aware of Pamela's deck when I created it. And because the one thing with tarot deck creation is you want people to find it accessible. And Pamela's deck is so well known and her system is just so logical. for somebody who was so creative and sort of free spirited, there's such a clear structure to her deck that makes it very accessible to beginners.
Yes.
But beyond that, do you use tarot for your writing? Do you want to talk about that, Susan?
I have to say, every once in a while, I will take this lovely deck.
Okay.
The Goddess Tarot by Kris Waldherr.
My baby, one of my babies.
I use that.
I liked when you talked about Pamela having her it's like her art was her children. Yes, one of my babies, one of my children.
And I see almost the cards, the 56 cards of the minors, more her children than the major. I mean, the major, I feel there's I can feel Waite's influence to sort of put those characters on a stage and make them fairly blank in expression and benign, so you can read into it, which makes them very accessible. But for me, if there's a very specific issue that I'm dealing with, I take out the majors and use the minors, because I find that they're more in tune with problem solving for me.
I find that to be very true too. And I usually find that the majors are literally about like the big themes of your life. And the minors are like, well, should I go to the grocery store?
Yes.
I'm simplifying it considerably, but that's what I kind of say, like, here's the highway, here's the local.
Yes, exactly. And for me too, it's a matter of, I always take a picture of my tarot spread that I've done for myself, and I put it in a folder. And at the end of the month, I go through it and go, oh, same card, same card, same card, same card. So then I go,
the stalker cards.
Did you get the message? Yes.
Yeah. Also, you get what I call the jumper cards. When you're shuffling the cards, you have certain cards that will jump out, like, pay attention to me, please. Here I am.
I'm so glad you said that, Kris, because you know, when I'm doing readings for somebody and you ask them to cut the deck, there are times when the deck will split into almost 2 or 3 different stratas. And then you go, oh, we're going to be here for a while. We got a couple, more than one thing we're going to address. Yeah.
But then also when I've read for people, if they only are getting minor arcana cards, I basically say, it's okay. It's fine. It's just details you get to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think when people come wanting big card answers, like if they've just broken up with somebody and they want the devil to show they got away from him, and the Lover's card reverse, and then they're getting things like, you know, 3 of Cups and 6 of Wands, and they're going, wait, what?
It's true. Yeah. It's true. I have a friend that when we read for each other, she always says, if I get a card I like, I'm going to put it back. It's called like a tarot for control fiends. She's joking, but it's kind of like an option, so she feels that she's in control. All right, so we're halfway through. Shall we do an example of how you use tarot to inspire you in your writing? And also, I want to open this up to questions. So, you have any questions, just pop them in the chat, and I'll go through them when we're done showing how Susan uses the cards for her writing.
Sure, I'd love to. Okay, so I've got my Smith Waite deck here, and take out the card that I pulled for us earlier about this panel, which was the Ace of Cups. And the thing I loved about that is that I feel so blessed that you're in my life. I mean, Kris, I bought that Goddess deck years before I met you. And the fact that I get to meet you here in New York and count you as a friend is such a huge blessing to me. I mean it.
Well, I know the first time we met, I think you came to one of my book signings, and I felt like, oh, this feels like somebody I already know.
Yes. So I'm going to do just a quick shuffle here, get some energy in here. I'm in the process of working on the 4th book in the series. The 2nd book is in the editors, the 3rd book's in final edits, but the 4th book, Lovers and Chariots, I'm in the process of writing out the arc and casting the 2 lovers, and I keep going back and forth about who the lovers are. So I'm just going to do a quick shuffle here and see what Pamela has to say today about my choice. I'm not even going to say who they are to the group because it still may change, but I do want to get a sense from her. I'm going to take my left hand, go down, a clean cut, pull it up. Okay, High Priestess.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to say that she's pleased with at least the female half of the lovers that I've picked for the lovers. And I'm going to wait to draw. Because
I would also say, seeing the High Priestess, that she's got some secrets to spill too.
Yes, and the thing that I love, I'm going to be a little coarse here, but the thing that I used to joke about with some other friends when I first was learning tarot is that the BJ stood for blowjob, because the High Priestess is before the curtain, and there's all these secrets I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be crass, but that was just what we, even though there's the two pillars of Solomon, we used to
Right.
talk about she's right after the magician, and she's sort of keeping him in line with her secrets and her power. And there she is, with the crown of Hathor and the crescent moon, Islamic, the cross, the Torah. So she's got all these religions, all these secrets, and the pomegranates that are from the Garden of Eden, the apple in the Garden of Eden. So
And
I
also
really see her
Persephone.
as
Yeah.
the secret keeper who can move forward and have agency with her own spiritual knowledge, and she doesn't have to prove it to anybody. So that's, I love you, Priestess. Yeah. So that's
Okay. I always love that card.
Yeah.
All right. So that's the female half of the lovers, it sounds
Yes.
like.
Sounds like I got a check mark at least who I've cast for that. It's always tough in a series with eventually there's going to be 11 books, and so
Wow.
I've sort of written the 3, but now I'm moving on to 4 and still carrying on the idea about Pamela creating this tarot deck in a hostile environment in Victorian times, where Aleister Crowley actually is trying to subvert her popularity with the deck, which in some ways he was at the time. I think it's so interesting that both Aleister and Pamela did not have success in their lifetime with their tarot decks.
Meaning commercial success.
That's right. I mean, they created
Yeah.
them, but it really wasn't until the 40s, I believe. I know that Leslie Lowe, who's here, she's a huge Aleister Crowley
Hi, Leslie.
aficionado. So, but that particular deck, I have never really been able to get in touch with, and I know that Leslie's really skilled at
Yeah, I think
interpreting it.
the Thoth deck that people either really connect with it or they don't. I love the art. I think the art is stunning, but I've always found it difficult to connect with.
Yeah. And so, I mean, and I think that's one of the reasons why when I'm, especially for
But you like it. Leslie likes it. Yeah. But that's why there's so many decks out there. And when you connect with something or when it chooses you, that's what it's there for.
And the whole philosophy behind Pamela as averse to the whole philosophy behind Aleister were, even though they were somewhat close in age, they came from such a different philosophy of the age, and agency. And I think it's so interesting that Aleister's deck was also illustrated by a woman, just like, Lady Frida Harris. She was the actual real creator, and Pamela was the real creator of the Smith-Waite deck. So it's interesting that both of that feminine illustration has stayed with us in these archetypes.
So do you want to choose another card for the male portion of the lovers in your novel? Yes, so it's called The Lovers, and
this is the 4th book in the series. It's Lovers
in the Chair. Lovers in Chariot. Okay, right.
So I got the Lovers settled, but it's the Chariot, which has been kind of a controversial. I mean, just like we were talking about the Meryl Streep deck, the fact that she picked Miranda, Devil Wears Prada. Okay, so shuffle the deck. I'm going to cut it and see what they say about the Chariot. Okay. The Fool.
All right. And it's interesting that you're using the full 78 cards, and you've gotten majors both times. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And majors that I'm pretty comfortable with. There's other majors I don't relate to. I'm not sure that this is a check mark on yes, go with who I picked as the Chariot. It may be saying you need to take a bigger risk. You need to leap off the cliff and take more risks for this. But I
also think it's about being open and seeing where it takes you, literally, as the Chariot, because it's interesting that you have somebody who's traveling and the Chariot is about traveling. Like they're both kind of forces pulling them forward in a way.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very good observation. Yeah, I'm going to have to do some thinking about this. It's and also because I'm using real people to be the muses. In the book, I have a mashup in an alternate history of who some of the people are in Magician and Fool, and in High Priestess and Empress, and even in Emperor and Hierophant, the first 3 books. But for me to hang on to a real person that may or may not have known Pamela as the muse, I think helps me thread history more. And of course, I have to be careful that I can't get hung up in doing info dumping, which is what I'm prone to do when I get so excited about research, so that I can leave that behind and still keep it focused on Pamela's story.
I think that's every historical novelist's temptation. Our devil. It's like, it's so fascinating. We just want to share it. Don't you want to know all these details? And remember, if you change anything in the history, that's what the author's notice for. Just say, I did this for this reason, but this is the reality. All right. I have one question so far. Do we have any other questions coming in? Barbara would love Susan to talk about cards that jump out of the deck while shuffling.
Yes.
Can you talk a little more about that?
So, usually I split the cards in half. I have them facing the same direction. I put them down and then I shuffle them to get the other person's energy in there. And I always ask the person to take a deep breath and center their energy so that their hand isn't shaking too much when because usually you're nervous, you're asking about a big situation, so your nerves can be in play and your hand has a lot of energy. But I ask them to steady, with their breath as much as possible. And I think it's interesting that it's sort of a ritual amongst some of us, Kris. I don't know if you do it too, is that we ask which hand you're strongest with. If you're right-handed, I ask them to use the left hand. For me, I like it because it helps not be an automatic movement.
Right.
And if someone has both hands that are equally strong, I say, give me your hand. And then the hand that they pick, I pick the other hand. So.
That's a good way to do it. It's because they will automatically go to the one they're the most comfortable with.
Yes.
I heard more about, and it's funny, I teach a whole thing about shuffling in my workshops. And I have like a whole list of the many different ways you could shuffle cards, just so people can find what they're comfortable with. Because sometimes people, they don't like, using them like a poker deck. Other people, I say, you can do this, you can do that, you can do whatever. And this is all the ways you can do it and all the rituals you can do. Now, what works for you? But I know that there's a lot to be said for using your non-dominant hand, because then you're moving more to the receptive side of your body, so to speak. So the jumping cards.
Yeah, and so then it comes to the point when you're actually shuffling, how fluid is it? Because sometimes if the energy isn't quite in tune with the person, it's like the cards are sticking to each other, and they're like little kids, you're dragging them to the park. I don't want to go. And so it takes a while to really shuffle them with the energy of the querent to make sure that it's a flow. I mean, I don't need to do a waterfall like you're at a poker table, but I still like to get the energy loose enough so that I feel that I'm actually, even when I'm doing a Zoom tarot reading, if we really concentrate on bringing their energy into the space, then the shuffle becomes natural for me. I like to take the cards. Other people like to put them in a big circle and then just scoop them all together. I mean, that feels very nurturing to them. So then once I've shuffled them, for me, where I feel that it's smooth, I do a lot of fussy little old lady, shoring them up. I touch them, I make sure they're square, I center them, I put them down as a brick. And then I like to put them down in front of the person as a very firm, contained essence. So if the card's going to jump, it's jumped because their energy has had several things come out to them. So that's how the cards jump out of the reading for me. And then they're all excited. They've just, lifted the cards up and they want to get going. And I'm going, oh. So then I have to put on my grandma glasses and go, okay, I see. Okay, all right, this is going to take a while.
I once saw someone, and this is another way you can shuffle. There's so many ways you could shuffle and prepare the cards, where she would shuffle the cards like going like this. And then she would just do it very quickly until cards would actually jump, and that you would only read from the jumping cards, which was really interesting to me. But there's just so many ways you can do it. And I think each reader brings something to it, and the way for them to also, it's part of the way that you set the parameters for the reading, I think.
Right.
Like opening the circle, so to speak.
And then sometimes, I have many decks of tarot cards, and over the years, of course, you've been around a lot of incense, a lot of, the stick wood smoke, so they get sticky. And you can't exactly take Windex and clean these tarot cards off with.
Definitely not.
So, I have one grandma deck that I love a lot, but she's over 35 years old. So, and you can also see my cheat ink marks in the margins when I was first starting out.
Oh, I've seen that deck. Yeah, yeah. People do that, like to remember all the keywords before
Even if you can't read it, it's like bringing that essence that you're trying to remember everything. So yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, or should I make up some more questions? I've got lots of questions. Or should we do a reading? Should we do a reading for somebody here?
Yeah, that's a great
idea.
I
see a lot of people going, yeah, I want a reading. Yeah. All right, the first person to stick their question in the chat gets a reading. Let's see how fast you can type. No pressure.
Well, actually,
DCC,
I should first do a reading for Barbara.
Okay.
Barbara, I think I did a reading for you many years ago. Can you turn on your mic for a minute?
Or maybe we need, okay, you unmuted yourself.
Yes, I've known Susan for a long time through many of her incarnations artistically, watched her like blossom in 1,000 directions, a beautiful bouquet. And I remember when I think she introduced me and my friend Susie to the tarot deck, and we were roommates at the time, and we were, taking one card at a time and learning. And so you were the first person that showed the two of us the cross and other versions. But she's definitely did some readings back in the day that were made the hair on your arm stand up with their accuracy and insight. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad sometimes the tarot cards come and warn us about certain things.
Right. So I think there was she told me to keep my seatbelt on, and I did have a car accident, and I had not had my seatbelt on, and went, oh, I should put on my seatbelt, and then the car happened. That was true. That was true.
So I'm going to just do a quick 3-card spread for you. I've just been thinking about you, Barbara, and shuffling.
Oh, I love you.
And then after that, I have Leslie says CCC, and Shell wants to know, what do I need to hear right now? And I love that question. That's kind of my go-to. It's, I know what I want to hear, but what do I need to hear right now? Very wise.
So Barbara, I'm going to do this way that I do to pick the card when it's on a Zoom. And I just take my finger and I just very slowly go up and down the deck. We're just going to take a second to sort of just be memorized. And then when it feels right for you, you'll say when, and that's where I'll cut.
When.
You'll all see why I'm laughing later.
Is it the Queen of Wands?
Yes.
Oh, how funny. How funny.
Okay, but first we're going to start off with Wheel of Fortune.
Okay.
So this is sort of like, for me, the past situation was like the world was spinning, in terms of cross sections of all these different possibilities, identities, religions are sort of up to grabs, but it wasn't a clear picture about where your focus was in terms of being in the miasma of the world. So I love this card in some ways because it makes you open up and go, what part of the world do I need to embrace, or what overstructure of the world is so overwhelming that it's oppressing? So it's yin and yang in some ways. It's saying, I need to understand the 4 great religions. I need to travel more, or I need to focus more on making my world happen, to bring the world into my world. So now I don't know if you're moving, but the world is here. And the thing that's so interesting is that both of these cards have the triptychs in the 4 corners. So these are,
and all... it's funny, when you were talking, I flashed on the world, and then you picked up the world.
Isn't that funny? If that happens.
Yeah, it does.
And both of these cards are overview of life situation, of seeing where your life is, where it's going, what the philosophy is with your life. and, making decisions that the world is safe, encompassed, together. And of course, Queen of Wands. So this is follow your gut, use your familiars. The other thing with the sunflower, the thing I've also learned from this card over the years is that it's also asking me to use my community more. Just sitting and ruling by my lonely self gets me absolutely nowhere. I have to take risks sometimes and make an idiot out of myself and fail. And this is what's hard, is especially if the Queen of Wands, behind this demeanor of the wands as working together, teamwork, this and that and the other thing. But oftentimes it's a very lonely place to be because you've set yourself up as an authority and you can't reach out for help or community. So this is definitely saying, in my mind, this 3-card spread is saying, whatever the situation is right now, you need more community, you need to reach out more, you need to absolutely lay on the table what's happening and to use your special intuitive skills to get to the next place. Does that make sense?
It's well, first of all, what's so funny is that with Michael Dixon, I'm taking the great courses of the creation stories and we're looking at all the religions. So that's weird. And Susan didn't know that.
Wow.
So
how perfect is that?
Yeah. And I am in the middle of battling with the city about improving the building that I'm living in for safety. And that is, so when you said, are you moving? I was like, oh, that's interesting. Just like dealing with elevator safety, senior safety, people that are disabled, things like that. So that's spot on. And I haven't talked to Susan in a long time, so she doesn't know that.
We'll talk later. I want to hear more about that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But that is a very, it's a beautiful reading. Thank you.
All right, we'll talk more.
Okay, and Leslie wants a reading. She says, yeah. And then we have Shell with an E asking, what do I need to hear right now? And then I think that'll bring us to the end of our hour.
Okay. All right, so Leslie, where are you
and
right
Tracy
now?
has to leave a little early, so let's bid Tracy a thank you for stopping
Tracy,
by.
thank you for stopping.
Yeah.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, Leslie, where are you?
I'm in New York. I'm in Brooklyn.
You're not in Mexico?
Oh, wow.
I go back Monday.
Oh, Monday.
La lunas. Okay, so indulge me if I may use that word. A quickie reading. I really like this technique you have of like that.
Yeah.
I have my cards with me, but maybe you should use your cards.
All right, I got it going on. I feel you, Leslie.
Okay.
All right.
And I don't have a specific question. I just want a general,
Sure.
Okay. Stop.
Ah.
Queen of Wands.
Wow. Okay. First up, Tower.
Ah.
So I think this is in the past, of course. So this is talking about moving, changing residence, things going ass over cattle, as they say. So really disruption of the way that you were living and all that. So it's acknowledging that it's, huge energy shift that's happened, striking to the very core of what your beliefs were. But that was in the past. And what did you do?
I was the fool.
You jumped off the cliff, you took all these risks, you remade things, you embraced, what the future was. I'm not sure I see a little white dog that is yours, but I know that you do have little white dogs and cats next to you.
Little white dogs, yeah.
Little white dogs. So yes, you're on your way to, making these new horizons and new mountains. And it's all about, absolutely no guts, no glory, leaping into the void. That's you.
Writing it down. Okay.
All right, girl.
Okay,
And
Tower. Very quick. Okay. Fool.
Our Fool. Of course, you got another major.
Oh,
One
of my favorites.
This is really about, being pregnant with content, being at peace, ruling, recognizing that there's a harvest, having a safe haven, having support. But it's really about taking the risk to get to the place where you can do that. So it's really seeing a place where you will be able to nest and come into your glory, come into your power. So keep taking those risks until you get to the safe place.
I will, because we have other folks that are waiting to hear from you, shall we say. No, but the Empress is one of my absolute favorite cards. And I always kind of like, I hope she shows up. I hope she shows up. And she did. So
She showed up.
She paid you a visit.
thank you so
Yeah.
much.
You're
Okay.
welcome, darling. Who's next?
Shell with an E, and she asked, what do I need to hear right now? A great question.
Okay, so Sean, I'm just going to take just a few seconds here to shuffle with your energy. And, even though we're Zooming, I can still, tie into what you are and what's going on. So let me just take a second to make sure that got it going on here. Yeah, oftentimes when you're shuffling, this wish list comes up about what you want to address. And then the cards, meanwhile, behind the scenes, they've got their own ideas of what's going to happen. Okay, that was good. That was good. I felt that. All right, here we go, Sean. I'm gonna lift it up. Let me do my grandma thing where I'm getting them all snug in a bed. Okay. You tell me when.
No.
Aha. All righty. Okay, we got some cards we haven't had before. We're going to start with the Chariot. And, the Chariot is all about movement, but not movement. It's about accomplishing these goals that you have, these esoteric goals that are really not about like running a race, but completing a course, completing a cycle in your head. You can see that the Sphinxes are both sitting there, but they're giving you the energy to actually, mark your place about where you are. And this is a divine race in some ways. You're answering a calling. But in the past, you actually had to start thinking about, how do I accomplish this? I mean, there's going to be some adversity about how you get started, but the whole thing is get started. Start mapping the course. And there's going to be obstacles, and there's a part of you that wants to win. So in order to do this, you have to plan, prepare, study, set all your ducks in the row. The Chariot is all about training to win this race. So do your homework. And that's my message about the Chariot. Does that make sense, Shel?
Complete sense.
Okay. So now we're going to go to the middle card, which is about what's happening now. Queen of Wands. So it's interesting.
Swords.
Queen of Swords.
What did I say?
He's the
Wands.
wands.
Oh,
I think it's because she's
Okay,
still on
sorry.
your mind. It's okay.
By the way, I get Queen of Wands a lot.
Okay,
So-
that's where the mix of things.
Interesting.
So I mean, the Queen of Swords, you can see she's wearing her red Kabbalah bracelet. So, and the storm has passed. So this is a moment where there's some judicious editing happening about what is going to stay and what is going to go. And this takes a real breath after the storm to be calm and to be making some editing choices about what's working in the lineup and what isn't. And you can see from the Queen of Swords, to me, has always been about fair, judicious calling. So it's, especially after there's been sort of either a temper tantrum or a meltdown or a power grab, this is usually all about, now that things have settled, we are now going to divvy things up so that it works for the Queen of Swords. Because what's happened after this is the King of Swords. Now he's a slightly different ruler in that it's not so much about calling, it's about anointing. But anointing can't really happen until you show that you're worthy. So it's interesting that this particular King of Swords doesn't seem particularly enthused about, what the lineup is. So it has everything to do with you finding about what you place in importance to hold up to esteem in these next chapters of your life. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
Wow.
it's interesting that you've got these court cards,
Yeah.
court cards to me, especially, are very much more like Kris and I were saying, are so much more specific about issues that are happening in your life rather than general wash of you're going to move or why do you trust that guy? It's
Mhm.
really, you need to make very specific to-do lists about what you cut and what you anoint.
What I was working on before we started, I'm returning to a novel I've been writing for a few years, and the pandemic and personal things just kind of killed my mojo for a while. But I have 140 pages of it written, and I had outlined the whole thing before, in the previous years, and I've written all of these scenes. And I was looking at what I have left, which is this page and all of this. And I was like, I'm going to print out a calendar for the next 4 months because my goal is in the next 4 months, I will finish this draft.
Yep.
And I was like, by the way, I just got laid off after 10 years at my job. And I'm trying to get some part-time work so I can do this, do this. And I was like, so you have to map out, this week you're writing these scenes. This week you're writing these scenes. Of course, it won't go that neatly, but at least I'll have a plan to adhere to. And so everything you were saying, completing a course, get started, obstacles, judicious editing, a storm has passed, look at what's working and what isn't. All of this is exactly where I am right now.
Yeah,
exactly.
And especially take the King of Swords advice to anoint only that which served you. Coming up next, don't just fill it with something. Make sure that you're very thoughtful, mindful about what is actually going to work for you.
Exactly. Wow, thank you. Can't thank you enough.
Okay, we're going to do just a couple quick more. Do we have anybody else who wants a quick reading before we
No, and we're coming up on the hour, I guess. Oh, Shell without an E, you have a question?
I didn't realize it was so late that I was gonna ask for a reading. I didn't realize it was so late. So
I'll do
okay.
I'll do a quick one for you, Shell. Let me just.
We're all here. Let's make the most of it.
That's right.
okay.
Is there something specific you're looking for?
I think mine is, what do I need to know right now?
Okay.
It has to do with my creative
All right.
journey.
Okay. All right. You let me know that.
Now.
Okay, now for something entirely different. Okay, so in the past, you've really worked so hard you couldn't see where you were going. You haven't even really been able to lift your head up to see what your path is. So yes, worked well with others, you're a delight, you can actually team build and lead people, but where are you in this card? You are carrying everybody else. So that's in the past. What's happening now is that you're sort of juggling sort of a broader scope of, the Pentacles for me are always about creativity, commercial aspects of creativity, putting signals up in the air, and you're juggling these ideas about how do you find equilibrium, either on one foot, there's travel involved, there's other obligations that are happening. So how do you get centered to get started? So, fabulous. I love this card. This is really one of my favorite cards. I call this the Italian Palazzo. So you got family, you got dogs, you got lots of creativity bubbles, the pentacles all over the place. And it's noisy and distracting and it's hard to concentrate, but this is what you're dealing with. So the adage is focus through the noise, set some times out for yourself so that you can be creative, because your garden and your inspiration is there, but the focus right now isn't. So this is asking you to, you've got family, you've got dogs, you've got outside stuff happening, but this is asking you to find a way to carve out the place where you can get back into what you need to get these lovely pentacles launched. Does that make sense?
Yeah, total sense. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Are we good?
Yeah. So Susan, I have a quick question. Larry has asked if you could recommend resources for a beginner to learn to read tarot cards that we would both recommend. There's a lot.
There's a lot. I think
Yeah.
I think the best go-to book is Sasha Graham's Waite-Smith book, because
Yeah, Sasha Graham is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
this big encyclopedia book that she has takes each Smith Waite Tarot card, and it talks about the background of the card, how it was developed. She also ties in Kabbalah with it. And so there's a lot of modern references that can make it really jump out to you. Robert Place also has a primer book that people have used through the ages. That's a much simpler, more direct. And then there's,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was also going to recommend that if you just want a quick start, I would recommend Teresa Reed's books are very good.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I like all of her. Like, she has a great one about astrology, and I know quite a bit about astrology, and I learned a lot. And also definitely Sasha Graham's, also Rachel Pollack.
Right. Who just
Yeah.
passed this month.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I'm going to make a list of these. And if people want to go to my
Yeah.
Facebook page, Susan Wan's Writer, I will list all these materials that you can find.
Yeah, I would post links, except I think that it's going to take a while. But there is a link for Susan's book from Amazon, and it comes out May 2nd. And I also posted a link from bookshop.org, which is independent bookstores. So you have a choice of whichever way you want to go. It's all good. We're just happy to get those books out there.
Thank you. I'll be posting this recorded Zoom on my Facebook page, and underneath it, I'll put all the reference material. And Kris, thank you so much. You know, getting
My
this book out,
pleasure.
having your help to put it out.
Of course.
It's just coming up so fast. In less than 2 weeks, it's getting out. But I love talking about tarot and why tarot is helping us be creative. I mean, I think your workshop about helping writers is coming up pretty soon too, isn't it?
It is. It's next week. And if you go to my website, I think there's maybe like 2 spots left, something like that. KrisWaldherrbooks.com. I'll put it in. And if that doesn't work, I'm also teaching it again at Hugo House in July. I'm teaching one, it's just a half-day workshop. The first one is like a quick start. It's tarot for writers. And if you don't know anything about tarot, it's meant to just get you going. And the second one I'm teaching is called Tarot for Character Creation. So it's about how you can use the tarot to fine-tune your own writing and the characters within fiction. And these were all part of multi-week workshops that I teach or have taught. I haven't been teaching so much lately because with the pandemic winding down, I've noticed people haven't been wanting to do as many Zoom workshops. But it's a multi-week class that I've taught in the past, where I go starting from basic of tarot, character creation, plot, and so on. Goes really, really deep. But as Susan showed us, there's so many ways you can use the tarot in your own writing. So I hope that that's inspired you, because I see we have at least one writer here. Yeah.
What date are you doing the July one?
If you go to my website, it's listed there. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm sorry, but KrisWaldherrbooks.com. They're both there. I don't think I posted the link, but if you go to Hugo House, I think they just put it up this week and I haven't had a chance to post it yet. They only send you the link so much ahead of time. But also, if you sign up for my newsletter, I usually include all that information and it goes out. I only send it out once a month. I don't like to bother people with too much information because I know that we all get so many emails. It's just information overload. So I only send out when I have something I need to share. So Susan, this has been amazing. I've loved getting to virtually visit with you. So we have to hang out in person soon.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
thank you all for coming so
Thank
much.
you for coming,
and your great
everyone.
questions.
Bye, Barbara. Bye, Leslie.
All right. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay.
Take care.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
All right.
Also, Unnatural Creatures was a really good book, and I put your
Oh, well, thank you.
I
You read
put-
it.
yes, and
Yeah,
I just wrote the review for it yesterday, I think. So
Oh, thank you. I
yeah, it's a good
appreciate
review,
that.
and it was a great book.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
good.
thank you.
Very
Yeah,
good.
it was a
Fabulous.
real labor of love. You know, I actually did pull cards asking Mary Shelley if it was okay I wrote about her, and she was like, yeah, let's do it.
Oh, cool.
All right. Thank you all. Ciao.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye.